Hello. Have you ever been looking for a home and you're interested in 100% financing? Well, let's take a look at one of the options that are available for you through First Home Mortgage. And I'd like to introduce you to JDawson, who is a loan officer that I work with frequently at First Home. Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Taylor. Pleasure to be here and speaking with you and sharing, our program to allow home buyers into a new home with little to no money out of their own pocket.
That's a great, it's just so good to hear that because for so many people, they're really stressed
Mhm.
with money, and many people think they don't have the ability to buy a home, even though they do have the money for the monthly payment. Joe, we're only seeing you from nose up.
Oh,
There
sorry
you
about that.
go. Um, so, why don't you tell us a bit about First Home and you?
Yes, absolutely. So, First Home Mortgage was founded in Baltimore, and we've been around for 35 years, believe it or not. Um, Our major footprint is the Mid-Atlantic market, though we're up and down the East Coast, frankly. Um, I myself have been originating loans in the DC area for almost 16 years. So plenty of experience and backed by, a company that has even more experience in this market. It's kind of right in the name there, right? First home mortgage. So a lot of the clients, the large majority of the clients that we work with tend to be first-time home buyers. The way that we approach things is, or at least I do, is very big on education. Even if someone's bought before and they're buying their second or third home, they may not have bought for 10, 15, 20 years. And things, as you know, Taylor, can
Have
change very
changed.
quickly in our industry.
Yes.
And you're probably hearing my dogs in the background there. So
No.
bear with me.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really appreciate about you and
Mhm.
working with you and our mutual clients is your patience
Mhm.
and your, as you say, you do educate and you're very thoughtful about what somebody might need, and you help them see what their best options are. You don't ever try to tell somebody this is what you must do, but
Mhm.
you always have two or three options and say, you choose whichever one you think is best for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I kind of view myself as I want to be a resource for the client. I want to make sure that they're aware of all the options that are available to them. And I'm happy to share my personal advice regarding pros and cons of any given scenario. But I ultimately want to leave it up to the client to choose what works best for them because we see a lot of information from a financial side of things, but we don't see those kind of intangible or long-term savings goals, et cetera. So, you know, someone might want to take a blowout vacation once a year and save
Mm,
money for that. That's something that isn't going to be on their bank statement, for
right.
example. It's not going to be on their pay stub. So by asking questions and understanding that specific client's goals and preferences, that allows me to better tailor the experience for them and provide options to meet those goals and criteria.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So, I'm Taylor Johnson. If you folks think this video is interesting, please click the like button. That will help other folks like you to find it as well. And I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Capital Properties. I've been in the business for about 10 years, and I've worked with Joe on many purchases with mutual clients.
Mhm.
And as he said, many of them are first time home buyers. And one of the options available to them is FHOP. Can you explain what that is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk about FHOP as well as potentially another program that
Okay.
First Home has that can benefit clients. But FHOP, as well as a lot of other down payment assistance programs, allow first-time home buyers to get into a new purchase ownership property as a primary residence with 0% financing. Now, a lot of these programs, whether we're talking about FHOP, whether we're talking about DC Open Doors, Maryland Mortgage Program, VHDA programs, etc., there's income limits. You can't make
Right.
too much money because the goals of these programs are to really help people that need it, not someone that earns, $500,000 a year and wants to, utilize those funds. That person can probably afford to make their home purchase happen without that down payment assistance.
Or they earn 500,000 and they just have never been able to save up money. That's not very good
Right.
financial
Yeah,
management.
that's a bigger issue, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so FHOP is a great program to utilize that. What, but again, there's criteria regarding income, first-time home buyer, sometimes geographic limits to the property as well. One program that we've come out with in the past year is a program, again, it's sourced within First Home Mortgage, but it allows 100% financing or 101.5% financing.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you can use it for closing costs help.
Yes. So we're actually financing more than the purchase price. It's an FHA program, so that is really helpful from the benefit of being able to qualify with lower credit scores, 620 credit scores. The way that it works is there's two loans, one a standard FHA loan, and then a secondary loan for either 3.5% or 5% of the
Okay.
sales price. The real benefit with this program, or benefits, I should say, number one, it's all in-house. So we as First Home, we have full accountability, full control of the file versus programs like DC Open Doors, those other ones that I mentioned through government entities.
There's always a secondary underwriting.
Right. Because the primary lender, like First Home Mortgage, we do our part. We can close in 12 to 14 days. But then we have to send it to DC, Maryland, Virginia, etc., and they have to do their part. And, generally they take a slower period of time. And that may not sound like a bad thing necessarily to a buyer, but it's important to note, and you can speak to this as well. Sellers, when they generally put their property on the market to sell, they want their money as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So if we can make that buyer look more attractive in the seller's eyes by keeping everything in the house and closing in 14 days versus telling the seller, hey, we need 30 or 45 days, that could make or break the offer. Another benefit is ultimately, the financing aspect of things. And, on top of keeping it in-house, there's no geographic limits to this program. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer. You can own real estate currently. So
Oh,
the parameters are much more widely available to
nice.
any client that wants to utilize it.
So
So
one key criteria, of course, is it's your primary residence.
correct, correct.
Right?
That's pretty much that in the credit score is pretty much the only criteria.
Is there an income limit?
No.
Really?
So that client that earns $500,000, they could utilize this program if they wanted to. Maybe they fell on, financial hard times and, went through a circumstance where they just don't have any of their own funds. We can help that client with this
Yeah.
program. Now, generally speaking, yes, it is more beneficial to have some kind of down payment on your own, but we live in a high cost area and we realize that a lot of people, rent is expensive, cost of living is expensive, etc., may not be able to save up the funds necessary for a down payment.
Yeah.
So
Or,
we
or
want,
if they do, it's going to take a lifetime to do it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Which
So
is really sad and unfortunate. Uh,
yeah,
it is one of the factors of our area.
yeah. And, you know, First Home created this product pretty much because of about a year ago, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I forget. No, it was last year, when the new administration came in and uh, basically did not want anything to do with DEI programs,
Right.
diversity, equity, inclusion programs. And there were certain mortgage programs through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac called community empowerment initiative programs to help
We're
bridge that
geared
gap. And
towards
yep,
underserved communities. Yes.
exactly. That really focused on communities either clients were living in currently and renting in and moving into another area or vice versa. And they were based on geographic income limits, etc. And the program shut those down, or the administration shut down those programs, I should say. So first home, we saw a,
There's a
a,
need.
a need for it. And full credit to our secondary team, our C-suite executives, etc., that basically saw this and said, well, just because the administration took that away doesn't mean we can't come up with something on our own to fill that gap and help
Terrific.
people in our community.
Terrific. Yeah. You know, that's kind of, now that you say that, it kind of clicks a little bit that one of the things that I've noticed about First Home is that it really does care about the client
Hmm.
and want to do the best for them in small, intangible ways that I may not notice with other lenders I work with. So,
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're not a big bank. We're smaller, we're nimble, we're agile. We as well as I do in this market, um, you have to be competitive. Otherwise, you're not going to last as a mortgage
right,
lender.
right.
And, customer service is one thing, but like if our rates were 0.5% higher than anyone else's, we wouldn't be in existence. It doesn't matter how good our customer service is.
People would choose the other 0.5% less lender.
Yeah, they'd go with the cheaper option and just kind of grit their teeth and go through the ringer. Our goal is to provide the best of both worlds, competitive market rates, as well as top-notch customer service.
Mhm.
Through that upfront education, some probing questions to better understand the client and understand their goals, and get them to the finish line and get them into their new home so that they're not throwing money away renting each year.
Right. I also like the fact that you're a local, regional entity, so you know the market. Um, your profits stay in the area.
Mhm.
You know, all of that I think is really important for people to consider because
Yeah.
you know they have a choice where they put their money,
Mhm.
so they might as well help their local area rather than send the money to San Francisco or something, right?
Right,
So,
right. And I get it that, especially as a first-time home buyer, they've never been through this experience
yeah,
before. And I try to take a step back on a daily basis and remind myself, you and I do this every single day. And things are ever changing, ever evolving. We know the terminology, we know all this stuff. And, I might be talking to a teacher, a nurse, etc. And, this is all completely new to them. It can be daunting, it can be overwhelming. The internet can be a blessing and a curse.
right,
AI will spit back, whatever you kind of put into it. And there's a lot of great information out there, but there's what I tell clients is don't disregard, what you hear from family members, coworkers, friends, etc. But I'm asking that you take it with a grain of salt because
and verify it.
you as a buyer, I like to tell them you're a special snowflake.
Yeah.
Because you
Well,
will
and what works for them might not work for you either.
correct. Yeah, and they may
That's the
have bought
specialness of your snowflake, right? Yeah.
exactly. And they may
Yeah.
have bought a year ago. They may have bought in, Richmond or Norfolk or Boston or Chicago, whatever it is. You know, even 3 months in this same market can change things from, a seller having more leverage versus a buyer having more leverage.
Yes.
So the more we can educate and relay that to the consumer, to make them feel more comfortable with the scenario, that's really the goal.
Or conditions change, or
Yeah.
FHA changes the like they dropped fees that they were charging a couple of years ago, and that changed their picture quite a lot. Like
Yeah.
they've now become more or less competitive with conventional in terms of costs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, so maybe something like that happens between the other person and you, and
Hmm.
so it's always important to get the most up to date information.
Sure.
So, Joe, with these two programs, the main criteria is first time home buyer. Is FOP has income limit?
Yes, it does. I'd have to double check that. Usually income limits are based on household income, not necessarily the qualifying, loan file income. Um, so again, these programs don't want people to game the system.
Right.
So if, let's just say there's a married couple and one of the spouses is left off of the mortgage. We don't use their income. We're not looking at their debt, their income, etc. However, these programs, any of these down payment assistance programs, except for this FHA 100, 100, 1.5, they will dig into the household income. They will look at, okay, do you have a teenager that works a summer job? They will look into that.
Hmm.
Um, Again, with, kind of that goal of helping as many people as they can. But it can be, a cumbersome process to determine exactly what the qualifying income that the government entity is going to use.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the nice thing about the in-house FHA program that we have, just because, we look at the qualifying income and we're ready to go.
That's awesome. So that sounds like that might be the best option. And that's a 30-year loan, as with
Mhm.
everybody.
Yep.
And the rate is competitive.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
there mortgage insurance?
There is, just because it's an FHA loan. We weren't able to change HUD and FHA's requirements for that. But, again, kind of as we've kind of skirted around, anytime I speak with a client and understand, their goals, their preferences, etc., I may show them a conventional option with no mortgage insurance and see, okay, here are the pros
What's
and
the monthly
cons.
fee? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see the monthly payments, you can see the cash to close, what works best for you and your family, both from a short term and a long term perspective.
Yeah. Because as you've alluded to, just there in that sense, there are two or several different financial aspects to the purchase.
Yeah.
One is the money now, and one is the money as you're living in it,
Hmm.
and one is the money over and above your payment. So
Hmm.
people have different priorities, right? And you
Hmm.
mentioned that somebody wanted to travel, so that their budget needs to include the ability to make that travel happen,
Yeah.
which is going to affect their monthly payment. And that might be the most important factor to them rather than having the cash, right?
Right. Yeah.
Somebody else might, like, they really want a house, they don't have the cash, they can afford the monthly payment, they'd rather not have one that high, but they'll make it work.
Hmm.
So for them, the really important thing is the now of no money,
Right.
and you have the ability to help them through that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, generally speaking, it- mortgage lenders, we can qualify people based on their gross monthly income. Your gross monthly income, that's before any taxes, deductions for retirement, etc. Obviously, that gross income is higher than what you see come into your bank account
Right.
each month. So a key question that I always ask clients is, what is your monthly payment preference, or is there a range potentially, or is there a
Hmm.
max? Because very often we can approve people for a much higher monthly payment than what they feel comfortable with.
Yes.
And I want to be of service to not only the clients, but to you as the realtor and save you maybe some time from showing people and clients properties that are outside of that monthly payment range.
Right.
That's not a great use of anyone's time to go out on a
No.
Saturday and look at homes that are going to result in a monthly payment that are higher than what the client is ultimately interested in moving forward on.
Right. That's why I always tell people, if you're thinking about buying a home and maybe it's a year out or 2 years out, it's still worthwhile having a consultation with someone like you now
Yeah.
to get a sense of what your purchasing power would be.
Mhm.
What are some things that you can do in the next year to get yourself into a great position to be financially ready?
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of times, what your aunt and uncle tell you or what some pundit has told you isn't the right thing for your situation.
Mhm.
And so, you need to talk to a lender who can tell you that because they'll look at
Absolutely.
your situation.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I forget where I was going with that, but that,
Can I tell you a quick
please, yeah.
story? So, to your point about, being proactive, usually when I have a consultation call with someone, a first-time home buyer, I will tell them like in my eyes, you've completed the hardest step of this process because a lot of people, don't want to hear, obviously not, like, hey, you're not in the position to buy like what you're looking for right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
But we can't solve the problem if we don't know what it is. We can't
Good point.
address it. So, to your point, I talk to clients all the time that, they just signed a new 12-month lease and they're looking to buy in spring of 2027 when that lease expires. And I'm just like, great, you're being proactive. Let's figure out where you stand right now. If it's where you want to be, fantastic. Just continue doing what you're doing. And then there are times where I speak to clients and maybe they need to work on their credit scores. Maybe they want to save aggressively to put forward a down payment and get, a potentially lower interest rate, whatever it is. We have time to do that at that point.
Right.
Recently, I had two different clients. One, same situation. Their lease was expiring in a year. Another client, their lease was expiring in 1 month. Spoke to them the same week. And the client whose lease was expiring in 1 month, was very, frantic, obviously, like, where am I going to live a
Like,
month from
yeah,
now kind of
right. I'm
thing.
going to be homeless. Yeah.
Right. And this client, the agent had introduced me to, 6 months ago. And each month I continue to check up to see, how I could help that client, if there's, time we could schedule a call, etc. Crickets. 6 months goes by. They need to move. They need to figure out what they're doing. And, they needed to work on their credit scores.
Mm.
And, given that time frame, we're doing our best to get that
Not
person
much
to
you
where
can
they,
do. Yeah.
we're doing our best to, see what we can do, but we're not the one making those credit card payments, etc. for that client. So,
Had
we'll
they
see what,
started 6 months ago, there's a lot more they could
yeah,
have done to change the picture. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. Exactly. So, um, being proactive is something that I'm certainly a fan of. Just because, again, if you're not in the position you want to be in, I'd like to help you get there. But very often that takes a little bit of time, potentially, with, strategizing, goal setting, planning, etc. It doesn't, sometimes someone calls me and their lease is up in a month and we can make it happen. And that's
Yeah.
great. Um, I think that's something that you shouldn't necessarily rely or assume on. And, kind of getting your ducks in a row financially so that you can go out and start looking at properties with confidence. Understanding your qualifications is really important.
Yeah. And what about the folks who spoke to you a year ahead? Do they have
So
work to do
they have a little bit of work to do, but
and they have
you know,
time to do it?
we have time to do it. We have time to do it, and they understand, and they're just like, yeah, this is exactly why we reached out to, make sure we understood what our options were, and they could feasibly do something right now, but we're putting them in a position that's going to be better
Yeah.
when the time comes where their lease is expiring and they're ready to own something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Joe, for your time.
Sure.
Again, folks, if you found this useful, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Our contact information will be in the comments below. Is there any last minute advice you'd like to give to a first time home buyer?
Hmm. Um, what I would say to any buyer, let alone a first-time home buyer, there's you're always going to be able to find an excuse not to do something.
Hmm.
Whether it's a war with Iran, whether it's a new administration, whether figuring out who the next president is going to be, etc. Um, really think about your housing experience and what your goals are. Yeah. There's a cliche in our industry, the best time to buy real estate was yesterday, the next best time is now. Um, we see property appreciation in our area pretty significantly.
Yeah, we've
Uh,
averaged around 5 to 6% a year.
yeah, yeah. And seeing that appreciation, someone paying down their own mortgage rather than paying down their landlord's mortgage,
Yeah,
you know, I would really like to help as many people as I can make home ownership a reality, if that's what they would like to do. Um, and all it is just starting with a quick phone call, 10, 15 minutes. And we can start to talk about what's feasible, and get you on the right path to home ownership.
excellent. All right. Well, again, thank you for your time.
Of
And
course.
let's see, how do I stop? Okay. I'm going to stop the recording.
All
Bye
right.
now.